It's a privilege to be here, and actually this first part I'm going to do, and then I'll pull in Claire, but I'm so glad that she's here with me because she is in the front lines working with children all the time. This is her flock of children of missionaries all over this region, about how many? Of 108, and that's what she does every day, is help those children be healthy and help the parents know how to raise them well. So she'll be giving some great insights as we go along. And I'm excited about this topic because actually it was the topic for my master's thesis when I was getting my master's, is developmental phases and how it impacts spiritual growth. So we could talk for a long time about this subject, and I'm going to try to talk briefly, and then they get to real practical questions as we go. But just some background. My wife's with me right now too, that in the back. And I remember when we first began serving Jesus in a town called Havířov, not very far from here, and we had young kids. And there's this question of how do we raise them well, and what does it mean to parent in this stage of life? And then they start growing, and they change. All the requirements change. The things that there's Claire, a younger version of Claire. Then they get to be teenagers, and that's when things get really complicated, and all your rules, the book of things that you knew how to work stop working, and then actually parenting doesn't stop, because you still are parents for adult children, and now we've got the next generation coming along. So I'm very interested in this topic because I want to be a good dad. My wife wants to be a good mom, and how do we adjust our parenting through those stages? And as Claire's working with children, how does she understand how is it different when you're working with a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 13-year-old? And how do you adjust your leadership during those times? Oh, that's another picture how they look now. So just a short introduction to developmental theory. And this is very, very quick and short, but within the mind of young people, two things change as they grow. One of them is content, what they know. And the second is structure, how they organize what they know. Content is added gradually over time. Structure changes abruptly in stages or steps. So this is what would be like content. You're learning different things. You're learning Bible stories. You're learning how to ride a bike, how to, build friendships. But structure, you're in a certain structure, and it actually changes in steps. You'll stay in a certain developmental phase, and then pretty abruptly, in a period of even a couple of months, that all will change, and you'll enter a new developmental phase. And so you'll see this as you're parenting your kids, as you go, wait, what just happened to my child? Like they were this way, and now they're somewhere totally different. So structure, it's like you have all this information, but your file system for how you organize it, it used to be maybe A, B, C, D, and now it's topical or something else. And it's actually quite disruptive. And these changes affect things like logic, how we think, and how we understand. This is a Calvin and Hobbes. Oh no, suddenly everything has suddenly turned neo-cubist. It all started when Calvin engaged his dad in a minor debate. Soon Calvin could see both sides of the issue. Then poor Calvin began to see both sides of everything. The traditional single viewpoint has been abandoned. Perspective has been fractured. Multiple views provide too much information. It's impossible to move. Calvin quickly tries to eliminate all but one perspective. It works. The world falls into a recognizable order. So, children, they just see things from their eyes. They actually don't see things from anyone else's eyes, and they have a hard time seeing multiple perspectives on one thing. So you're still wrong, Dad. Moral reasoning, how we decide what's right and wrong. So to a child, what's right, how do they decide? It changes over time. Relationships, how we build and maintain relationships. So why do we become close to people? How do we build and maintain them? And a source of authority, who we listen to and why. And according to, and I know I'm going fast on this, some of this you'll have to go back, and according to Fowler, Piaget, Kohlberg, and others, there are 5 basic stages. Each is characterized by a different stream in which the person is embedded. So if you just see this picture, they're on this raft, and they're all traveling together, and they are in the stream and watching the bank go by, but they're in the stream. They're embedded in the stream. So they're really not objective about the stream they're in because they're embedded in it. Someone from the bank would watch them go by and see something different than the stream they're embedded in. And so each of these streams, you're actually stuck in a certain way of thinking, and you see the whole world through that particular way of thinking. And here are the 5 stages. In stage 1, your whole world is organized. The organizing element is intuition. You just intuit things. So I remember asking my son when he was at this age, wow, that was really smart. How did you know that? And he said, I just knowed. I just knowed. They can't tell you how they came to conclusions. It's just intuitive. One time he ran into my room and he said, Daddy, Mickey grew. Mickey grew? Well, we had just gotten a new stand for our TV, and so the TV was higher. So Mickey grew, right? Like he's higher. You intuitively, you don't go, you got a new stand for the TV, you go, Mickey is taller, so he must have grown. Or we used to say, when are we going to leave? We're going to leave in a half an hour. How long is a half an hour? That's just, what's a half an hour? So we just say, it's about the length of a poo video, and so then, okay. I intuitively can feel time because I intuitively feel those things. So they love, they feel things, they love stories at this age, but they're just sensing things, not through logical thinking, but through just intuition. We'll go back to each of these in a little bit. So this is kind of the overview. There's a lot of brain development before age 5. Look at that, 90% of your brain development happens before age 5. So much is happening in those early years. Look at the brain development that happens in those preschool years. So we think, oh, nothing's happening. We're just playing. We're just, hanging around doing things. Look at all that brain wiring that's happening in those early years. Now let's go on to the next one. The next one is events. So then around 7 years old, 6 or 7, this is about the time people start school, they start organizing everything by events, kind of cause and effect relationships. And one of the things is their brains are at birth like this, at about 6 years old, they're like a thicket. And now they're trying to wire those brains. They just intuitively got all this information. And now they're trying to figure out how everything fits together. Well, this causes this, and this causes this, and they become kind of little professors. And I want to read you. I started journaling when I was towards the end of this, when I was 12 years old. And let me read you something from my journal on January 23rd. Okay, this is a stage 2 boy writing in his journal. I woke up at about 7 o'clock and read a book until 8 o'clock. Then we had breakfast, and afterwards I read a book and worked on a working mobile clock the rest of the morning. Dad stayed in bed all day. He was sick, by the way. Then I had lunch at about 12 o'clock. I was very hot. The temperature was 90 degrees Fahrenheit. After lunch, I went for a walk and looked at some stores nearby. When we got back, we had dinner at about 4:15, and then I took a shower. After that, I went over to the Binghams and played some games. Then I went back to the Servicemen's Center for reception for Dad. After the reception, Dad talked with Mr. Bingham, and I worked on the clock. I got to bed at about 11:45. Any observations about my day? It's all events. Every bit of it is events, right? So if you say, how do I organize my day? How do I think about my day? I think about it in terms of this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this caused this, and this. No reflection about the relationships, no deeper thought about any of those things, just some events. So if you ask someone in this stage, if you ask if they go to a retreat and you say, how was the retreat? They'll tell you everything that happened. If you say, how was the movie? They'll recount the whole movie. If you say, who are your friends? Why are you friends with them? Well, because we play basketball together, because we walk home from school together. You actually form relationships by doing things with people in this stage. So we'll come back to this, by the way. Then it's interesting, this synaptic pruning that happens during that phase as they're trying to rewire their brains. Here's the third one. Somewhere, then all of a sudden everything changes and the whole world gets reorganized into relationships. And actually the brain changes in such a way that for the first time they can have formal reasoning and not just concrete reasoning. And they can think about how I see you seeing me. So you'll notice that kids before then, I would wear the same dirty t-shirt every day, day after day. And in the summer, the only time I put on my shoes was when we went to church. I didn't care. But then I hit this stage and I'm like, is this shirt? Are my shoes just the right ones? Because all of a sudden I can see all of you seeing me. I haven't been able to see you seeing me before that. And they become super self-conscious and very concerned about what everybody else is thinking. And the whole world starts to revolve around relationships. So let me. This is another journal from a little bit later. Not too long later, just about 2 years later. March 8th. Howdy. I'm turning Western. It sure has been a while since I wrote in here, but that's what I say every time. Maybe now that the show is over, I'll have more time. But it's sort of a letdown after all that work and time to have it over. The biggest thing I'll miss is the people. Some of the people I got really close to in the show are not in all of my classes, especially Karen Turner. I'm really going to miss being around her. The sort of relationships you have with these people are really amazing. You can go up to them and put your arm around them or anything. And then I go on, and a little bit later I say, but coming back to the kids at church is really different because they're really different from the people at school. Joanna gave me some cookies after the show with a nice note, but it just wasn't the same. It's kind of hard to explain. No times. What do you hear? What do you hear? Just a couple years later, the same guy, you know. What do you hear? It's all about relationships, right? The whole world is about relationships. So when you ask someone in stage 2 to go on a retreat, they're going to say, what are we doing there? If you ask someone in stage 3, the question will always be, who's going to be there? And also, are they my friends? And if you ask them after retreat what happened, they'll most likely give you a dialogue about how all the relationships went. And it can be the best program in the world, but if the relationships are broken down, they don't like it. And they can sit under a bridge and be happy if they're with their friends. It's just all goes around friends. Stage 4, concepts and ideas. So somewhere towards the end of this, maybe about 19, sometimes 18. And as you get farther on, it gets blurrier in between, so you can see that they overlap a little bit. They begin to start organizing their world around concepts and ideas and kind of differentiating themselves from their relationships. They are not their relationships. Here, they choose their friends and their friends choose their ideas, but in stage 4, you choose your ideas and then you choose your friends based on them. And I remember when Tyler, my son, went through this change, he says, Dad, can we study apologetics? Or maybe prophecy? So he starts wanting to just make sense of the world, you know? So all of a sudden they become interested in something like systematic theology or answers to key questions. And you can see college ministry is focused around that kind of thing. And then it's important who's speaking and are they authoritative. In stage 3, it's, are they my friend? That's what's most important. But now stage 4 is, do they know their subject? Did it enrich my knowledge? Does it help me make sense of the world? Now, one of the problems, though, is stage 4 is quite black and white. It's very boxy. They don't like gray. They want to get the lines, and they can end up being don't see that things could be maybe held together. They like to organize, but really put things in boxes. And then stage 5 is the stage of principles, where you move to big principles like justice and love. And by the way, different books of the Bible are more like this. And back to stories. So stage 2 loves stories. Stage 4 is they just analyze stories. Stage 5 is really back to some of that, the big, C.S. Lewis is very much of a stage 5 kind of a thinker and writer. But they say that 80% of adults never reach stage 5. So most of our churches are full of stage 4 people. When I preach a sermon in a church, I usually prepare it at stage 4 and put some things in an upper box for the stage 5 people to have along the way. But my basic structure often is a stage 4 structure, more about making sense of the world and differentiating different things. Because most people in churches are at that place, and but stage 4 has a really hard time handling conflict. You know, two truths that it's God's sovereignty and free will. Well, wait, how can they go together? And they kind of want to make everything clean, and you have to turn that this stage 5 can handle gray. Well, that was fast. We blew through that really quickly. Are you still with me? Now we're going to go to, okay. But actually this stuff is really powerful. So now here's a chart that goes through that logic, moral reasoning, relationship, source of authority, and shows it. And by the way, you have this in your notes, and there were some mistakes made on the years on the top in your notes. So the first section of the years are correct. Here they're correct, but they aren't totally correct in your notes. But this just shows how that kind of plays itself out through the principles, which is just really interesting. But now let's talk about how this affects parenting. Claire, come on up. So now we're getting into some practical things. So in this intuition stage, which by the way, up till 2, they talk about pre-operational, which is this is before children can really interact and talk. So when children start talking and interacting with you, now they're in this stage 2 intuition. And how does connection work in intuition stage, Claire? What are some things that parents need to keep in mind for this stage?
I think anybody interacting with a 2 to 7-year-old has definitely been asked, will you play with me? And for them, that doesn't mean will you do an activity with me necessarily. It's not event-based. It's not I need to do this or accomplish this. They just want you to be with them in their world, whatever they're experiencing. So sometimes I have made the mistake of saying, what do you want to do? And a lot of times they don't know the answer to that question. All you just have to say is, yes, I would love to play with you. Because for them, that's what love and connection means, is being with them in their world, imagining things with them, and entering into what they are getting excited about.
Awesome. So that's a great connection. Now I've got grandkids, and sometimes they'll come and say, Papa, will you wrestle? And actually, wrestle is just an excuse for a long, manly hug. That's what it's really all about. And if you make a lot of noise while you're doing it, it's even better. Because it's just this intuitive sense of it's not actually who's going to win a wrestling match. It's I feel close to you. I feel your physical body with mine. I feel this. It's that intuition that comes. So play is really important. Now, what about discipline in the intuitive phase? Can you say something about that?
I think that there's a lot of theories behind discipline and different options that you can choose. But one thing that I've experienced, because I'm not a parent, so I don't have as much authority to do certain things in discipline and have certain consequences. So for me, as somebody who's often a volunteer or a leader, one thing that I have found is there's a lot of ways that you can redirect kids while not having that authority to discipline them. And one of the ways to do that is to say, you can choose between this and this. One thing is obeying, and the other thing is the consequence. So saying, you can choose whether you want to listen or whether you want to have a moment by yourself with this person, or whether I'm going to move you to a different seat. And then you give them the chance to choose between those 2 options. And if they experience the consequence, then they've chosen it. And that's their decision. And that helps them to start feeling like, okay, you're for me, you're with me, but also it helps start to move them into that direction of recognizing I actually had the power to decide in this situation.
One of the typical mistakes parents may make in discipline in this phase is they discipline with long conversations. And so they'll say, honey, but please don't do that. And then they just start explaining all the reasons. Or they'll say, oh, that hurts mommy when I do that. Well, actually, at that age, a child can't get out of himself and feel mommy's hurt. He only feels the confusion of the whole thing, or maybe just enjoys the long conversation. It's like this is fun. Oh, I get mommy to talk. And so until a child intuitively feels the consequences, if you just explain them, they don't exist because they exist in this world of ideas and thoughts. So that's why you actually want quick discipline that is intuitively felt by the child as some kind of consequence. So at this stage, when our kids were young, we spanked. Now, that's something that sometimes people today go, oh, you can't do or whatever. But it was, we didn't beat. We didn't do anything like that. But there is something about short physical pain that is intuitively felt. You intuitively feel that, that connects. Now, there are other things you can do that have that same intuitive impact. But I would say discipline needs to be quick. It needs to be intuitively felt. It needs to not be done in anger because they're intuiting this anger and not knowing what to do about it. And you need to be able to move on quickly from it because creating long periods of discomfort is not the best thing there. The other thing is they can intuit whether you believe you will win. Okay? And so you've got to know that you're going to win, and it's just a matter of time, and they'll feel that. They'll know that, and that's important for them to know. Communication. Claire, tell me some of your thoughts about that.
I think when kids are stubborn in communication at this stage, it can be our tendency to think that the first response should be discipline because they're not listening. But because they are intuitive and want to really connect with you in that space, and they're trying to figure out what their voice is, whether they have autonomy or not, one of the best ways that you can communicate your desire to them is through story or imagination. And so I was sitting and having a meal with a 3-year-old, and he was very stubborn and did not want to eat. And so I told him, I'm going to separate your food into the beach and the water, and you can choose whether you want to eat the beach or the water. And he was like, okay, I'm going to eat the beach. And he did, and it was fine. And he was like, look, I had another bite of beach. And he just thought it was great because it was using his imagination and communicating actually in a language that he could understand. If I count, a lot of people will say, eat 5 bites. That works too, but if you can do it through play, it's even better. So if you use your imagination a little bit, then they will much more willingly communicate with you and get onto your agenda too.
One of the things I love watching Claire with kids this age, she is a master at redirection. Like something can be totally falling apart and Claire steps in, pretty soon it's all going the right direction. You go, how did that happen? But what she does is she starts with connecting because it's that intuition. So she'll if you see her with kids, she's down on her knees, same height, close, form some connection, and then redirects. And so often it'll be like, oh, did you see that? There's a picture of a man above the door, isn't there? Yeah, I wonder where he's running to. And there'll be this sense of now you're caught up in a story together, and the kid, oh yeah, and they'll stop crying and try to figure out where the man's running to. She does this all the time, and so it's pretty amazing. That's a little magic there.
Which, by the way, I learned a lot of that from my mom, who is also a
yeah. She was
master
also.
at this.
I would watch Connie do this, and I'd say that's not fair. You're not. You step into situations breaking down. Pretty soon, just this redirection that's happening, and they were both really, really good at that. So I had to learn that. Here, typical mistakes. Typical mistakes. One of them is not managing and cultivating the emotional environment. See, they feel everything, and if you're like, I love you, and it's time to go. Come on, hurry. You're doing a good job. They feel frustration. They don't hear any of the words you say. They feel your emotions and sense your tone of voice. And so the emotional environment of your home is so important at this age because so much of what they're not getting through actually the specifics of what's going on. They're feeling the environment and it's shaping them. And so if you find tense kids, they often have tense parents. Frustrated kids, they have frustrated parents. Worried kids, they have worried parents. And you can tell them all you want, but they will intuit what you're feeling. And so you really need to maintain the emotional environment of your whole home. The subtext is the text in this stage. It's the environment is the message when you're in the intuitive stage. Greatest challenge?
Because their emotions are their full experience, I think we can sometimes get overwhelmed by their emotions, and they get overwhelmed by their emotions. The hard thing is it doesn't work to say to a kid at this age, calm down. They don't know how to self-regulate yet, and us telling them to do it will not work. They will just get frustrated, and we will get frustrated. So what they need is something that's called co-regulation. That means that you calm down together with them. So that kind of connection redirection can be your framework. So you can get down to their level and say, hey, wow, I can see you're really frustrated. And usually the kids will be like, yeah, I am. And then you say, okay, we're going to calm down together. What helps me calm down is taking a deep breath and maybe walking outside. So let's take a deep breath together and then we'll walk outside together. So you are actually regulating yourself and them at the same time. And this is how they can experience that regulation for themselves so that they can intuitively start to pick up on it.
Co-regulation. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Tips and tricks? Anything you'd say, Claire? Tip and trick for this stage? All of them all. What?
All of the tips and tricks. I would say as much as you can, do things with them because they're intuitively picking up on everything. So whether that's inviting them into the cooking process or inviting them into, okay, wow, mom's really frustrated. She needs to calm down. Why don't you join me? We're going to calm down together. Or just welcome them into your world because they're picking up on everything that you're doing. So as you are modeling that to them, then they are learning as well. And for them, every single one of those opportunities is an opportunity for connection. So they're just happy to be with you.
You just think about the fact they're wiring their brain by the stimulus you provide in the environment. They're actually wiring your brain. So even though they aren't learning pieces of information, they're actually developing the wiring that they're going to work with the rest of their life. And so provide them with a rich, creative, emotionally rich environment, and realize that environment creating and maintaining and connection and what you're feeling emotionally in the moment between you, what's going on, is actually the things that's wiring their brain during that time. Events. So let's think about this. Remember my journal entry and what I said there. So connection. How do you connect with people in this, or with children in this phase, Claire?
When I get together with kids, a lot of times if I know that I will be building a relationship with them over time, I'll ask them, hey, let's make a list of all the things we want to do together. And we'll come up with that list together. And then just as we hang out, I'll say, which one of these things do you want to do this time? So one time I had a hot chocolate tasting party with 2 9-year-olds. And we made 5 different types of hot chocolate, and then they had to rate which one was the best. And, we had lots of conversations about their friendships and their family along the way. But for them, in their mind, they were like, we're hanging out because we're having a hot chocolate tasting party. So they need to understand what's the purpose of this time that we're spending together, and what are we actually going to be doing? And so if we can make that list ahead of time, that can sometimes be helpful in having kind of an excuse to connect.
Okay. Doing things together is super, super important. And you might think, you might think you buy your son a Lego set and then sit and build it with him together. And the whole time you're just building this Lego set. Well, what did we do? I mean, he could have built it alone. I'm kind of wasting my time. No, this is highly relational. You're doing something together. That is what relationships is. Remember my journal. It's all in these events that are happening. So do things. And if you can do things that you might say, well, we ate dinner, we cleaned up. But if you do things that are unique and that are actually designed to spend time together, I told our kids when they were at this age, I would do things with them alone. I'd say, let's do something fun together. So Caleb and I went and we climbed a mountain together. And that was just a huge, then we built something together. And Tyler and I did something together. We also did during that time. But those activities, the fact that they were alone and unique, then all of a sudden we have a deep relationship. Why? Because we climbed a mountain together. We have a deep relationship because we built a fort together. And don't feel bad if you didn't get into deep conversation. They're giving you all they have at that point. They don't have deep conversations going on in their mind, but the events are very formative. Adventure, accomplishment is a big deal. Discipline. Claire, say something about this.
Cause and effect was already mentioned here, and that's super important for discipline at this stage. So for the effect, the consequence to match as well as possible the offense. So if they, for example, break your favorite mug, then maybe the consequence is that they need to do some chores to make some money that then they will contribute towards buying a new mug. And as much as possible, try to explain to them why you chose that effect, or, because this happened, now this is what's going to happen. And they'll usually be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, right, yeah, okay. And they won't fight back as much because they'll understand, yes, I did something and the effect of that makes sense.
They're in a stage called concrete reasoning, which is very much about cause and effects. I do this, this happens. To do this, this happens. So rather than the intuitive impact of my disobedience. The logical impact of my disobedience is most important here. So when our kids hit this stage, we stop spanking. Because it's not, what's logical about that? You know what, I broke a vase and you made my bottom hurt. You know, that just doesn't make, I mean, I was just a child, always stopped. We didn't do it then because it's a different kind of discipline. Sometimes people physically discipline too late. But you think about, what are the logical consequences? You're wanting to teach them that the world has a set of cause and effects. And actually, when you disobey God's laws, they impact it. And so, we did things, they love cause and effect relationships, allowances, things that you earn or lose, games, scores, all of those kinds of things. It's all very concrete, very logical. It makes the world make a lot of sense.
I was just going to say, I think one thing that could help too, if you're a parent, is to sit down with your kid in a calm moment and make a list of what those cause and effects would be. So you can be creative. Maybe the kid thinks, oh, well, actually, I think that a great punishment would be doing push-ups as a result of this. Well, okay, then you have that agreement with that kid and they understand when that thing happens, they're going to be doing push-ups.
Yeah, we actually had a family we were helping with discipline in this area, and the discipline was push-ups. Kind of interesting, you know? And they decided on it beforehand, yeah, that'd be a good discipline, I could do it. So, boom, okay, here it is, boom, 10 push-ups. We'd all sit and watch them. Okay, then we go on. But it was a cause and effect relationship. It was something that signaled to you that I did something wrong, and it also broke the pattern. Okay, and actually there was, one of them was a girl, and she got really strong because she disobeyed a lot.
Great effect.
Yeah, great effect. But okay, communication. So I would say one of the things here is ask specific questions, and feeling questions are straightforward. How do you feel today? I'm tired. Well, can you say more about that? I'm tired. You know, how do you feel? Well, I'm scared. Well, like, what are some of the reasons why you're scared? Well, because it's scary. You know, it's all pretty straightforward. It's all pretty cause and effect. And so, but there's more relationship going. So ask, you know, what did you do yesterday? How was the movie? Ask kind of event questions, cause and effect questions. By the way, in this phase there, well, I'll say this in just a minute, but there's more going on in the relationship than you realize. So you may go, we've got a really superficial relationship. No, you're getting everything that's there, and it's really meaningful to them. So don't minimize that kind of relationship with kids at that age. It's super meaningful to them, much more than you realize, and they actually don't have those other categories yet. They're not there. All right, typical mistakes. Oh, I'll say something here. I would say this phase, kids can learn so much in this phase. There's so much development that happens at this phase. They learn fast, they memorize. I memorized lots of verses at this phase, and I memorized verses because I'd get a candy bar. Okay, you see the cause and effect relationship? And so I'll memorize verses for a candy bar, no problem. But I remember them to this day. They're all there. They memorize so fast. They remember things. They're little professors. They want to figure out how this works and how this works. They learn skills really fast. They memorize, they master, they learn. This is a great place just to learn all kinds of things about the Bible, learn skills, and memorize stuff, and develop and compete and all of those kinds of things. So it's not just, you're not just, because actually they'll lose some of that ability. You know how hard it is for you to memorize a verse today? And I was part of something called Boys Brigade. It was kind of, and we'd get points for various things. And I go, okay, I need some points. And I'd go off for 5 minutes and memorize 3 verses and come back and, got my points. And I remember those verses still. I can't do that today. So there's a real amazing opportunity for a lot of learning that we don't want to miss. And Grace Challenge, Claire?
One of the things about cause and effect is that not every time that you try does it work out well. And kids at this age get really frustrated by that. So the phrase, it's not fair.
Yeah, do you hear that phrase at this age?
It's not fair! Because in their mind, they think this and this equals this, and it didn't that time. So what do I do with that? That doesn't make sense to me. So they need a lot of empathy in this from us as adults to say, I know, that's really frustrating. I get it. And I think that it's a time to affirm the strengths that you do see in them and say, I know that you worked really hard to be the first in that race, and you didn't win even though you put in just as much time, maybe more, as somebody else. But I see that you worked really hard, and that's amazing. So the stage in Erickson's theory is called industry versus inferiority, which means they want to know what they're good at and what they can actually do well. And a lot of times they can feel like, I'm the worst, it's not fair, I can't do anything. And so as much as you can, you want to affirm the strengths that you do see them doing well and the cause and effect that you see that's maybe bigger than what they can see. So maybe they can't see that, oh, I won the race, but maybe you can say, you got so much stronger and you got faster than you were 3 months ago. And that's really awesome.
Typical mistakes. Claire, what would you say? Or tips or tricks, what would you say about that?
Similar to what I was just talking about, if you can take the time to explain a greater cause and effect, that will help their mind start making those connections. So they might be surface level cause and effect, like, for example, I studied hard for this test and I got a C, and that doesn't make sense. But if you can explain maybe the greater cause and effect, like you studied hard for this test and I see that that's building endurance, then they're like, yeah, I've got endurance, yes. So if you can take the time to explain what's happening, then they'll start to make those connections that are important.
All right, we're moving on to stage 3, relationships. So this said 13 to 18, but it could happen a little bit early. It's when they go through, there's cognitive development is tied to this. It's the onset of formal reasoning. It's actually big changes that happen in your brain. And so this is the first time that I can see you seeing me. It's the first time that I can deal with abstract concepts and ideas rather than just concrete concepts and ideas. I have a whole new set of emotions that I don't know what to do with. All of a sudden the body begins developing sexually, and so now I have to deal with all of that, my hormones, my attractions. This is a very turbulent time. So you'll find this when kids come into this stage, and it's turbulent for you, and it's just as turbulent for them. So that's one of the things you have to realize is this is not an easy time. I can remember when I was in the middle of this, well, first of all, I was tired all the time. I just was tired. I didn't want to do anything. I was sleepy. I wanted to sleep all the time. And I was irritated. And I didn't understand what I was thinking. I didn't understand what I was feeling. And I remember one time my dad getting frustrated with me. And then I heard that he'd been up part of the night praying for me because he was so worried about me. And I was just as worried about myself because I didn't know what was happening. And I remember I never did this, but I almost wrote him a note saying, Dad, I'm really trying. Just have some hope. I think I'll make it. But I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's very disruptive. So just realize that however much you're disrupted, they're disrupted as well. The whole world is turning upside down, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. So here, connection. Claire, say something to us about connection during this.
I think most of my childhood, my dad was really good at being aware of the stages that we were in, but for sure not everything probably worked out according to plan.
No, it didn't.
But I remember my dad coming and knocking on my door when I was a teenager and poking his head in and saying, hey, Claire, what are you doing? And I would get...
Now, what stage of question do you hear that at? What are you doing? That's 2. Right?
I would get so frustrated because I felt like he was attacking my sense of value. Like, I am doing important things, Dad. Like, I promise I'm not doing something irresponsible. But now that you're asking me, I'm doubting that you believe that I am using my time well.
See, now, one of the things they can do is they can think about what you're thinking for the first time. And they don't always get it right. So she's thinking about what I'm thinking and then concluding some things about it. And then thinking about how she feels about it, and all this is going on. So I'd open the door, Claire, what are you doing? Nothing. And I'm trying to connect with my daughter. I just, wondered what she was doing. Well, that's not what she was feeling at all.
So we talked through this. Thankfully, I had an older woman in my life who spoke into this and said, maybe you should tell your dad that bothers you. And so we talked about it when I was 16. And so he asked me, well, what question would you rather I ask? And I said, you could ask me, how are you feeling today?
Do you hear the difference in that question? How are you feeling today? Oh, okay, wow. So this is where parents, we sometimes our kids move into another phase and we don't make the transition. We don't realize what are you doing and how are you feeling today are very different questions for a stage 3 person. Extremely different questions. And so one of the things I really appreciate that Claire had older mentors are really important during this stage because they're starting to push off from their parents, and you want them in a good youth group, and you also want them to have some older friends that they attach to, because they're going to need some reference points even outside of you to find the way. So Claire had a good, and I really appreciate her courage and giving me some instruction because I was not doing very well. So this connection, it's very much a relational question. It's like, are we like in a relationship? Or are you just my dad trying to run this house and making everything go right? And I was talking to one of my friends, and he said, I'm so concerned about my son. I think he's not gonna turn out very well, and he's become real sullen. He's not talking with me. One of the things I told him is I said, your relationship with him means much more than you can imagine. Teenagers will push away and they'll act like they hate you and they don't like you. But I even did a study on this, and parents are by far the most important people in adolescence life, and they'll never let you know. They'll never let you know. So when you work with adolescents, I often heard them talk about their parents, and you won't know that. It'll feel like they're ready to just write you off. And so his son would come in and he'd say, we get in these arguments. And I say, where are those arguments? You were usually standing up as he's going through the kitchen or the living room on his way to his room. And I said, well, you can't have talks there, standing in your space. What's his space? What's his safest space? And he said, his room. I said, okay, go up, knock on the door of his room, ask if you can come in, and sit on the floor. Don't sit in a chair. Teenagers sit on the floor. He says, that's going to be tough for me. Sit on the floor. Sit on the floor. Get in his space, because it's really all about becoming friends with your kids. So now you actually need to get on the channel of friendship, and how would I build a friendship? And then slow it down, give it some time, because they're doing all this processing that's all new to them, and they're not good at it. And short answers don't work. They need longer conversations. Teenagers have long conversations with their friends. They need longer conversations with you to explore things and try out various ideas. And so he did, and he sat down and he reestablished his relationship with his son. And he actually his son went on to plant a church, and out of it, and they had just a really, really close relationship. So connection. And so discipline, Claire. Anything you want to say about that?
That also has to be a perspective of we're looking at this problem together. So we're sitting next to each other looking at this together. So if you're talking about something that happened or something that they're deciding about, you can say, for example, hey, how did that go? How did what you did, how did that go? How did that affect your relationships with this person or this person? And then you could say, how could we do that differently? I can tell that landed in a different way than you wanted it to. What are some other ways that you could adapt next time? So you're kind of problem solving together and looking at it as two people looking at the problem. So they need to feel like you're on their side.
And that's really important what she said about on your side, because they're going to go, is the relationship at risk? Because it's all about relationship. And if it's like you have to change your opinion for us to have a relationship, they will fight that. Or else it will crush them. It'll do one of the two. So it needs to be, hey, listen, our relationship is never at risk. You're my daughter. I love you. You're my son. I love you. Yeah, this is a problem. You know what? Yeah, let's work on it. Because they're developing their moral reasoning, and they actually have to practice it. And so they're going to ask why. Now, when young children ask why, they're trying to delay you, right? Why? They really aren't listening to the answer. They're just extending the conversation. When teenagers ask why, you need to slow down and answer it, because they're trying to figure out the whys, and the whys are really important. And what would happen? I remember one time asking my dad, Dad, have you ever thought about maybe God doesn't exist? And he says, yeah, I have. So you see, he could have gone, my son's throwing away his face. Yeah. And I said, well, what did you think? Well, let's think about that. What would it be like if God didn't exist? What would that be like? So, okay, what would it be like if he did? And you see how he's developing my ability to think in abstract ways and use this part of my mind that I haven't. I remember one time I said to him, Dad, can I go to the dance? And he says, let's talk about how you make decisions like this. What would be things for going to the dance? What would be against? If you did go, what would you have to remember? If you didn't go, what would you have to? And we had like a 20-minute conversation about that. And then we got to the end and he says, I trust you, make a good decision. That's really interesting, isn't it? So he didn't say no, or he didn't say, yeah. He's trying to develop my moral reasoning and develop my ability to think. And it's longer conversations. You really have to slow things down with teenagers. And one of the challenges is when those conversations come, stop and engage in them. Because they might, there's timings on this. And you have to sometimes really rearrange your schedule because now's the time that they're ready to talk about it. And they might not be 2 hours later, So really take advantage of those times. So, and the relationships are super important. I remember one time about this age, I got in an argument with my dad. He got angry at me. I slammed the door and went downstairs to my room. And a little bit later, I heard a knock on the door of my room. And Dad said, could he come in? He came in, he sat down beside my bed, and he says, Dave, I just came down to apologize. He said, my relationship with you is really precious to me, and I don't want anything to risk that. And I responded in anger, and that was wrong. Would you forgive me? Whew, that's really good parenting right there, So, because what you see is I was wrong, but my dad responded in anger. And then we could come back and totally talk about what I did wrong. But you see the relational dimension of what's going on? It's that relational dimension is very important, very rich, and they're learning a lot about relationships by learning how they relate to you. So the why is very important. Communication. Claire, do you have anything to say about? I talked about sitting on the floor where they feel comfortable.
The other thing is a lot of times they'll want to talk late at night because melatonin is actually not released into their systems until 11 p.m., which means they really, if you try to send them to bed earlier, chances are they won't be able to fall asleep.
Hard time getting up. Yeah. So that's why young people hang around so late at night talking to each other. Typical mistakes. The biggest one is, it gets scary during this time. Young people start getting out of control, and parents revert to stage 1 or stage 2 discipline. So often with stage 1, parents have these long talks with their kids. But in stage 3, they say, do it. Why? Because I'm the parent. And by the way, if you don't, no money for the rest of your life. And you just try to find this big consequence that you could pile on them. And that's actually really stage 1, stage 2 parenting. So they revert back, and the kids are going, Or they say, hey, if you mow the lawn, I'll give you 3 pieces of candy. And so they don't parent into the stage. So I find that often in stage 1 or 2, you parent like they're stage 3. They get to stage 3, and people parent like they're stage 1 or 2. So have a talk, extend it out, explain why. Listen, slow it down, and stay close while they're pushing away, and discipline in relational ways. Talk about there must be consequences, but make sure you deliver them in relational ways and continue to support through those relational times. Greatest challenge, I would say the greatest challenge is staying close while they're pushing you away. Staying in close relationship. This is a huge challenge. You're the most important people, and you've got to ride out the disruption with a sense of confidence and hope. You're going to be okay. You're going to make it. You're going to get out the other side of this. It won't always be like this. I have confidence. You're going to grow up to be just a wonderful young lady. Wonderful. You got to settle it because it's so disruptive for them. If you start freaking out, the whole thing's lost because they're freaking out. Tips and tricks. Claire, do you have anything to say about that? Let me go back to that.
As they're pushing away from you, part of that is something called self-differentiation. Yeah. So part of becoming an adult is recognizing I am my own person apart from my family of origin. And so this is when they're doing that, and it's important for them to do that. And I think we as adults can celebrate the ways that teenagers are different from other people or different from maybe us. I remember my mom noticing that I really loved whenever we would have guests over at the house, and she's really good at hospitality, but it's not life-giving to her. And so she would say, hey, I see that this is something you're really good at. Would you be willing to, bring out dinner for everybody? And I was like, yes. And it was so affirming to say, oh, we're different and that's okay. And there were other areas where like my dad has strengths that I don't have, and he would say, well, you might not have this, but you have this, and that's super cool and really valuable.
She's super artistic, and I am too.
I was the least musical in our family, and I felt like the black sheep in our family. And we had a lot of discussions about, okay, well, so you're not this way, but you are artistic, and that's a really beautiful thing.
She's very artistic. It's pretty amazing. One other thing I'd say real quickly here is this also changes how you spend time as a family, because we had lots of wonderful, amazing family vacations, and then you hit this age, and kids are like, I'm going to spend 2 weeks with my parents. So what we did is we vacationed with 2 other families. So we created this bigger relational environment. They had kids the age of our kids, and all of a sudden there's this interesting spin of relationships. So sometimes, pull their friendships into your family. So instead of having them push away, make them a part, just expand your family to include their friends, and then you don't lose your family in the bigger mix of what's going on. Be interested in your friendships. Their friendships. Have their friends over your house. Be the best home for them to hang around in with their friends. And we would have these amazing, how many people were, it was like 14-person vacations that were just really fun. So think about that. Take their kids' friends along. Get to know them. Be close to them. Okay, then concepts and ideas real quickly about this. One is the brain is not fully mature until you're 25. So young people are still growing. Connections, and this can happen when, Claire, when you hit this phase, tell something about connection.
For my 22nd birthday, my parents were visiting me in college at that point, and they asked me, what do you want to do for your birthday? And I said, can we go to a coffee shop? I want to talk about church with you. I don't understand the purpose of church and how it all connects and what these different versions of the church are. Can we sit down and just talk about it? And so my dad walked through all of the theology of the church with me over coffee in 3 hours, and that was the best birthday present.
Okay, now isn't that interesting? So that was the best birthday present. That's what you wanted to do on your birthday, because you're in this world of trying to make sense of the world, and if someone can be a guide and actually enter into that and help you, that's a big gift. Now, we weren't having those discussions when you were 16. There were different discussions like that. So discussing things together is a great way to connection. Discipline is not really necessary at that stage, but you do want to continue to point out the consequences of their actions. Hey, did you do this? You see what happened? Person reaps what he sows. So you're actually doing more about pointing out the natural consequences than you are necessarily of disciplining, unless they've taken your car and wrecked it or something like that, or not. Communication. One of the things I'd say here is that this communication is sometimes better in longer stretches. So even now in Claire and I's relationship, not long ago, we went out to lunch, was it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We just had like 2 hours together, and it was really, really fun because we needed a longer conversation. Like there's a lot going on, a lot of different pieces, and just a lot of short conversations often are not enough. So you still need to set aside time for longer conversations. My son was just up, and we had spent 2 evenings from like 8 o'clock till 12, long conversations. And we have short ones too, but the long conversations mean a lot. Typical mistakes. Claire.
I think that those of us who are seeking to be independent adults want to make our own decisions, but we still need help. So I think maybe a typical mistake would be that the parent would either just completely pull away and say, you're on your own, go for it, you have to figure it out, or would overparent and say, hey, have you thought about this, or da, 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 and would kind of jump in and take away some of that independence. And so it's really helpful, or it has been really helpful, was helpful during my college years when there would be time for communication and then time for me to just ask questions. So like when my dad would just create space and say, hey, do you have any things that you're wondering about or thinking about, or you want help thinking through? So then he helps me think through a concept or an idea or a decision, and then says, yeah, you can make whatever decision you want. So supporting independence while also saying, would you like help with any of this? I think is a huge support as a parent.
Okay, greatest challenge. And anything you want to say, Claire, here on greatest challenge or tips or tricks?
I think that regular connection with a young adult saying, what do you actually need from me, is probably the most helpful thing that you can give them, because that might change year to year depending on what stage of life they're in, how independent they are. But if you open up that conversation, then you can see, is this something that I'm able to give or not? And that can be a discussion between the two of you too.
Okay, and you never stop parenting. Or being friends with your kids. My relationship with Claire is a real treasure for me. She's just a really important person in my life, and love her very much. We're super proud of her, and I love being in relationship with her, in an ongoing way. We're going to take a trip together in a bit to the Philippines, so we're going to do that in July, and we still try to think of things that we can do together, and it's just super enriching for me. And you never stop being mom and dad. And that goes on the rest of your life, and those relationships are really important.
And we still have to have conversations about hard things too. Like as a young adult, I realized, I have the power to hurt my parents. And I never really realized that before. And so we've had some really difficult conversations as well, but it's a continuous process of building that relationship.